Good evening and welcome to another edition of Down to the Wire, the Preakness Stakes edition. And this week joining me again is Capping with Candice. Candice here. And Candice, an exciting Peter Pan Stakes last week. Tonalist kind of verified some of our belief in him with a nice front-running effort.
Yeah, I mean, he was a horse who we spoke about on a few of our Derby roundtable videos that we had, and we were really looking forward to him, particularly following his second place finish to Constitution in that allowance optional claimer down at Gulfstream. And we really hoped he'd run in the Wood, and unfortunately he got a little ill and couldn't run there. So he came back here in the Peter Pan and ran a really nice race in the slop, from a front running race to get the job done over Commissioner. And you know, on some hand, I was impressed, and I was glad to see him run the way he did. On the other hand, because it's in the slop, you always have to be a little bit wary of, just taking that form directly, particularly because he is by Tappet, and the Tappets have seemed to take well to the slop from what we've seen so far this year. But nonetheless, it was a good effort. If there's anything to take from it, I do like that, he started off his career as, pretty much a dead closer, didn't show any early speed at all. And then in that allowance optional claimer Gulfstream, we saw him show a little bit more early speed, flattened out the end a little bit there. And then here in the Peter Pan, he took the lead very early and just held on the rest of the way. So he does seem to show some versatility as far as his running style. And for me, that's probably the biggest takeaway is that tactical speed that he appears to have. And I mean, he definitely looks to me to be a Belmont type. So I'm excited to see what he has for us coming up next.
It looks like from that race, both Tonalist and Peter Pan may be going to the Belmont, and actually not Peter Pan, Commissioner. Commissioner, he plodded along. I think what Commissioner needs is a hot pace and a full field, and he just doesn't seem to be getting that. And so I'm not as impressed with Commissioner, but at least he keeps on kind of rounding into shape, and I think he may eventually get that light bulb to turn on. But it'll be nice to see Tonalist in case. California Chrome were to lose in the Preakness. I think that Belmont field could very easily get to a 13-horse field pretty quickly. Let's move on to the Pimlico Special on Friday. Competitive field. There's a little bit of rain in the forecast, and a few of these horses faced each other at Oaklawn, and then you got Moreno shipping in from Charlestown.
Yes, I'm pretty excited about this race. I think it drew a nice field. For me, ultimately, on form alone, it came down to Moreno, Burglar, and Revolutionary. Ultimately, I sided with Moreno. I really liked his race last time out. I mean, I think that Game On Dude ran the best race in the Charlestown Classic, but Moreno was kind of up against it with whatever was going on in front of that race from a pace standpoint. Kind of him and Game On Dude kept going at each other the whole way, and it was a really, to say it was contested was pretty much an understatement. But he re-rallied there to get third, which was nice to see, particularly because it was his first start off of the layoff after being injured at the end of the year last year. So he'll be up near the front, if not the pace setter himself. And like you said, weather is likely to be a factor in this race. And if the track is downgraded, he has won. He broke his maiden by a wide margin over a sealed muddy track at Belmont, and his pedigree is just perfect for an off track. He's inbred in Mr. Prospector. And for me, I mean, I don't know a lot about pedigree, but I do know I always look for that in reality via relaunch, and he has that on top of his pedigree. So if this track is sloppy, I think that he's really, really going to be tough to beat.
I was kind of torn between a couple of horses. I'm still debating that track on Arkansas Derby Day. It just seemed like some horses really liked it that day, and other horses just really floundered. And Carve and Prayer for Relief, I thought, just didn't like the track, and I thought Golden Lad actually regressed that day. Revolutionary should like the mud. I mean, his sire Warpass won one of the biggest slop-aided days ever when he won in the Breeders' Cup, on the Breeders' Cup Day that year that it rained like crazy out at Monmouth. And so he's got a little bit of slop breeding, and he really should like the distance. So ultimately, I'm going to pick Revolutionary because I just think he's going to like the distance, and I think he's probably more likely a grade 2 horse. The other horse that I like a little bit is Prayer for Relief. He's one of those horses that once every 3-4 races kind of tends to pop up and run a good one. And he was pretty dull in that last race, but then when you look at the final results, he still only ended up like 3 lengths behind him all the way around. So there may be a little bit of improvement off that effort possible. Did want to talk about the Korean Flash here. The Korean Derby guy came over and got beat by 40 lengths in his American debut. What was interesting, though, is that they ran a mile and a quarter in the Korean Derby in 2:10. I can only imagine the Beyer speed figure talk after that race.
Yeah, I don't really know what to say there.
But it is kind of interesting because you've got we don't see too many horses from Korea, and then also a horse like Moreno, he was actually supposed to run in that Oaklawn race, and then he actually ended up taking another plane trip going out to the bull ring. So whenever horses kind of face each other multiple times, sometimes I like to play for the form reversal. So Revolutionary is my top pick, but I kind of like Prayer for Relief as he could be the guy that kind of maybe wakes up a little bit on a different surface. Of course, a chance to combine the Pimlico Special into the Dixie and Preakness into a pick three. And the Dixie comes up a competitive field of older horses, and we've got Roadhog, and it wouldn't be a turf race in America without a Kitten in there.
No, it wouldn't. It was your idea to handicap this race, and I just want to thank you for having me handicap a turf race where weather is probably going to be a factor and we have no idea what the track's going to be like, because looking over this race was absolutely horrible trying to think of every possible scenario. So I'll give you a few. If this race is off the turf, then I don't really have a choice for you. I won't play it, so I have nothing for you then, sorry. But if this race is on the turf and the track is firm, I do like Roadhog. He's interesting. He just ran, his first start of 2014 was here at Pimlico, and he had a really, really tough trip and still just missed by a head there. So, he just seems to be a really consistent sort, always mix. I mean, this is a little bit tougher group than what he's faced, typically, but he just seems to be one who, he runs his race every single time. And like I said, he had a really tough trip last time out. He figures to improve off of that. So if the track is firm, I like Roadhog here. If the track is downgraded for any reason, but they're still on the turf, then I think you have to give a long, hard look to Nutello. Obviously, he used to run over in France, and then since he's come up here, I think he's been a little bit of a disappointment. But he does have, perhaps maybe his best run to date was when he finished third out of 20 on a good to soft track over at Chantilly. So, I mean, that's not heavy by any means, but their tracks are a little bit deeper over there. So, for him to run that well in a Group 1, over a downgraded track, makes me think that he's one you have to really give a look to if the track is not firm here, even though maybe he's been a little bit disappointing as of late. But this is an interesting field. Hey Leroy, is one who can totally get up there, has, run well over at Gulfstream, but I think maybe has struggled a little bit away from there lately. But for me, Roadhog if it's firm, Nutello if it's anything else.
There is some rain predicted for Friday, but Saturday they're saying it's going to be dry, or at least it may rain a little bit in the morning and then dry off. So I would think with the 2-day wager, if they were to take that race off the turf, it would be an all race. So I think they're going to do whatever they can to try to keep that race on the turf. Nutello is interesting. What I like about him is he's kind of one of those all or nothing horses. He's got a real high win percentage, not very many seconds. And then, Hey Leroy is one of those horses, the same connections as Social Inclusion, and another very astute buy by that stable. And, they've made some nice purchases, and he kind of got on a roll at Gulfstream. Sometimes those horses can regress. They kind of really just kind of have their form cycle for 3-4 races. So my top pick is Nutello. I do like Roadhog. He's just one of those horses that seems to like the East Coast, and he can handle firm. He can handle the distance. Charming Kitten is going to be, playable in a pick 3 wager for the 2 days. So I'd probably play, 2 horses in the Pimlico Special, 3 or 4 horses in the Dixie Stakes, and then go into a couple of horses for the Preakness. So I guess we're both kind of leaning towards Nutello and Roadhog, but I wouldn't throw out Charming Kitten, and then Hey Leroy is possible if you want to go a little bit deeper in that race. Now the Preakness Stakes, we've had a couple of weeks to kind of project the field. The post positions were announced today. And did anything shake out on post positions for you on your analysis?
I don't think anything that happened for postpositions was make it or break it for anyone. I'm pretty sure, the connections of Dynamic Impact would not have wanted the rail, being that he's a horse who comes from off the pace. California Chrome, I really would think he would have rather be outside versus inside pretty much all the speed. But, while those aren't, beneficial to either of those horses by any means, I don't consider those positions to be, to toss them for that reason. They're not make it or break it.
Post positions. First off, let's kind of go with a couple of these horses on the inside. One is Dynamic Impact. He has a 2-race win streak. I do like the pedigree. This is one of the few horses where if I said, okay, can they go a mile and 3/16, and does he seem to be improving? What I like about that Illinois Derby was he was gritty. Remember, Midnight Hawk was 3-5 that day, and he chased him all the way around the track, and yet you could kind of tell that, it looked like Midnight Hawk was going to beat him, but he was kind of resolute, and I like that. And that may be signaling that he's ready to kind of step up, and maybe that pedigree, and a lot of those Tisnows don't really get good until, June or July of their 3-year-old year. So I thought that was a pretty big win, and of course Smart Strike is a well-known sire. And then General A-Rod, first they said they'd wait, and then they kind of entered in this week, but he really didn't do a lot of running in the Derby, so I think General A-Rod comes in with a pretty good shot if he can, smaller field and a little bit of a step down in class from what he was facing in Florida. So I think those two horses could be somewhere in the mix. I'm not sure exactly yet.
For me, Dynamic Impact is my second choice. I really struggled between him and one other horse, and ultimately I put him second. I don't love him on the rail, but like I said, it's not, just a killer post position for him. Off of, his recent form, I think that he is a horse who seems to be improving and kind of getting good at the right time. I really liked his race against Midnight Hawk. Like you said, I thought he was really gritty there. And, that was a horse that visually it looked nice, and the speed figures seemed to back it up. I mean, it was, legit fractions. They weren't going slow there. And I think a race like that is one where you have to separate Derby horses from good horses. I think a lot of people look down on Midnight Hawk because he was never really a Derby contender. But he was a good, consistent horse who just always showed up every single week, and a win over him is a valuable win, whether or not he was a 10-furlong horse. So I like that win by Dynamic Impact. I think he's going to need some help. He has a little bit of speed to find here, and if, he really kind of needs that pace meltdown, which, there's definitely potential of that happening here, but I do think he needs that to really be in for the win. But he is a horse who I'm going to include on top because I do think the price is right, and I do think he's, getting good at the right time, and like you said, distance isn't really a concern for him as it is for some of the others. As far as General A-Rod goes, I agree that he didn't do a lot of running. In the Derby, he had trouble pretty early on. He was steadied and such, so, it wasn't like he was all out there by any means, and he should, still have some left to find here, but I just think we've kind of seen it all with him. I mean, he's ran so many times this year, and, we've been waiting for him to make that jump forward, and it just kind of hasn't happened, which is a little bit disappointing.
Well, one of the things with this race is I'm projecting a fast pace. For the Derby, I thought it would be moderate. I think really, even without the blinkers, with Rosie and Barron, I think that horse has got some speed. I do think Social Inclusion is going to be the speed of the speed. He has 8 speed points, and I think he's the horse that they're sending. How far, and really what is the talent level of a horse like Social Inclusion?
For me, Social Inclusion is my top choice here. I agree that he is the speed of the speed. He's a horse who I've kind of flip-flopped on when he had that big allowance option claimer win down at Gulfstream. I think he really captured everyone's attention, and that race you kind of had to separate it because, I mean, Honor Code obviously wasn't 100%, and it was a small field, and so I think the win margin was kind of exasperated by the fact that Honor Code wasn't fully fit, and the type of race he had to run was counter to his running style. But if you watch that race and just focus on Social Inclusion, it's hard to ignore how easy he ran as fast as he did there. Speed aided or not, that was his performance alone was just really, really nice there. And he came back to back it up in the wood, which that's what caught my attention when he finished third there. He broke a step slow there, and he rushed into, it wasn't a fast pace, but it was, a very healthy pace. And typically rushing into, a pace like that in a grade, well, it's a grade 1, that's, usually a recipe for disaster. And, for him to do that and have a wide trip throughout, finish third there, and that form held up in the Derby pretty well. The horses who beat him were Wicked Strong and Samrat, and they finished 4th and 5th respectively in the Derby. So, social inclusion off class, off form, off speed, he just makes sense to me here. I agree that he's going to be the horse, who's going to be the speed of the speed up front. He should have the lead turning for home. It's going to be a matter of how far he can keep it, but I think that he has, a pretty good chance of wiring this field, even though there are a lot of front runners here. I'm just not sure if any of them can keep up with him early, even though they want to be out front. I'm not sure that all of them can be. I mean, a horse like Ring Weekend absolutely wants to be on the front, but I don't think he's fast enough to get it whether he wants it or not.
So what, a lot of time, for 2 weeks there's been this ongoing discussion with California Chrome, and the speed figure can be debated forever. For me, I always approach this from a wagering standpoint. There's 2 schools of thought. You key California Chrome on top on all of your wagers, and you do straight exactas and trifectas, and trust me, there's money to be made. I've seen $40 exactas with 4 to 5s in the Preakness. So I fully endorse that strategy if you truly believe he's the horse to win. Also, for my strategy really is to cut back on my wagers, take a shot with a couple of horses, and if he wins, I don't really have any vested interest. If he loses, the payoffs go up exponentially. And a horse that I kind of like in this race is Pablo Del Monte. He's one of those horses that when he won back at Keeneland last year, I put him in my stable mail and was really impressed with him. And then it was kind of a long, strange journey. For some reason, he showed up out west on the turf. I never really understood that. I thought, well, God, if this horse is pointing for the Derby, why would they ship him out west to run him on the turf? And he ran flat, and then he went to Florida, and he shows up in the Gulfstream Derby, and then, he's facing these 2 guys that nobody had ever heard of at the time, named Wildcat Red and General A-Rod, and then I kind of wrote him off. I kind of just said, well, he can't be that any good if he lost to those 2 horses. And then those horses ended up really running good, and I think one of the most underappreciated victories of the winter meet was Wildcat's Red sprint victory.
Yes.
And Pablo was in that race.
Mm-hmm.
And then he came back and ran a huge race on a day when nothing but closers won at the Bluegrass. He set honest fractions. And I know it's the old cliche, he's tearing down the barn, and this is the horse going right now, but I just think he's by Giants Causeway, and I think he's fit, 2 6-furlong workouts. I think he's going to run a good race, and I just think he's going to be 30 to 1, and he may not win, but I think he could run second, and if he somehow does manage to win, I just think he's going to be like 50 or 60 to 1 in those doubles or pick 3s, so I'll throw him in there. So I like Pablo Del Monte. I do think General A-Rod is kind of interesting just because he did not run at all in that Derby. He was just bottled up the whole race, and I kind of liked him as an under horse in the Derby, and so now I'm thinking, people may just, he might go up to 17, 18 to 1, and he's another horse that if he were to really run his race, I think he could very easily be second. California Chrome, the only strategy there is on paper he's the best horse. It's just, can he run on 2 weeks rest? And you don't know that until, once I see him in the post parade, I'll probably be able to tell you right then and there if he's going to win or not.
Yes. What I want to add too about Pablo Del Monte, because I definitely see why you like him. And I was there on Bluegrass Day, and I mean, like you said, it was all closers all day, and you could argue he ran the best race of anybody there. And that's another race. The Bluegrass is another race where the form held up pretty well in the Derby. Medal Count ran a really nice race there and was kind of sawed off at the end. Dance with Fate finished up well, so it's another one where that form kind of carried over a bit. But one thing that's interesting to me when I looked over Pablo Del Monte's form is, his 2 runs at Gulfstream on the dirt. People are kind of throwing those out and saying that, well, he didn't handle the dirt. But those are also, 2 of the only races I saw him run off the pace, and they're both at Gulfstream. So, bear in mind how Gulfstream has played this meet, that it's been very difficult to close. So maybe those races aren't as bad as people are making them out to be.
Another horse, I think Barron is kind of interesting. He gets Rosie, and she does well on the East Coast, and then they're taking the blinkers off. And then, and that horse, ran a nice speed figure competitive-wise in the Derby trial at a flat mile.
He did. It was a nice race. I mean, he drifted a little bit late, and I think that's what's kind of put people off. But I'm not sure if that was him or if that was Rosie. I mean, just the ride itself, she seemed like, with the whip, she was kind of only on one side, and he drifted away from that. So I don't know if he just kind of shied from the whip a little bit there. But I mean, he is a tough one. If you liked him prior to that race, he's tough to ignore because he ran some really nice races out west, fast races. So, I mean, you have to think that, he's competitive in this field. And it's just kind of like what you said. I mean, it's really going to depend on what California Chrome does. If he, runs back to how he ran in the Derby, well, he's going to be really tough to beat if, even possible. But if he doesn't run 100%, if he regresses even the slightest, this becomes a very, very competitive race really quickly.
When I was writing my pace analysis, it kept on coming into my head that, I think social inclusion is going to be sent. I think Barron's going to be up close. I think Pablo has the speed if he wanted to go to the lead, but I think like you say, I think those Gulfstream races give him enough confidence that maybe he can sit a length off. I've already seen a few quotes from California Chrome's connections. Oh, we can lay fourth and 5 lengths back, and I'm never a believer in that. I always just say, you know what, that's easier for me to say. Heck, I'm a runner, and all of, I've covered a lot of high school track, and you see these guys. I literally seen track meets where in a 800-meter run, a guy will win by 6, 7, 10, 12 feet, and then the next week I'll talk to them and they'll be like, oh, I'm going to change up my running style, and then they lose to the same runners by like 30 feet. Like. I don't think it's as easy as people say it is.
Right. I mean, it's easier said than done in any of these race strategies. One thing that is, notable with him is, General A-Rod tends to be fairly forwardly placed, so you have to think, he won't be right up on the pace, but pretty close to it. Dynamic Impact, I think, has to go a little bit further than maybe they'd like because he drew the rail. I can really see California Chrome ending up on the rail this race. And to me, it's not going to be how many lengths behind he is. It's going to be how many horses behind he is. I mean, if you're thinking social inclusion will be up front, Pablo de Monte will be up front, Bayern, Ring Weekend, potentially General A-Rod and Dynamic Impact, well, then you're really banking on, those horses all really taking it to each other and softening each other up. At that point, it's a matter of him passing that many horses. And that's just not something that he's done in his wins. And any of those things, it's not to say that he can't do it, but why would you take him at 3 to 5 morning line? Who knows, you have to be 1 to 5 or 1 to 9. Why would you take him at such a short price when, he's going to be put in, a pace situation, and maybe being further back than he's ever been in any of his wins? There's just too many questions, I think, to take him at any kind of a short price, even though he is, the fastest on paper, maybe bar social inclusion.
Another horse we have to talk about is the Pride of Ellis Park. He got the 10th post. And if a pace meltdown actually does occur, this is probably one of the few horses that could take advantage of it.
Yeah, he definitely can. I mean, I know a lot of people were kind of all over, all his fans were kind of all over Calvin Burrell's case based off his run in the Derby. I don't think that was a bad ride at all. I mean, you kind of know what you're going to expect when Calvin Burrell gets on him. So, for people to get mad that he was as far back as he was and up along the rail, well, that's what you're going to get. So, I guarantee you that's why he was put on that horse. He did rally there late. I think he passed, some tired horses. I don't love him, but like you said, if there is a pace meltdown, he is one who could take advantage. And, of the real surefire, kind of closers in him, maybe, or him, and Kid Cruz and maybe Rhea Antonia, depending on what they do with her. I do prefer him of that group. I do think he is the fastest of that trio, perhaps.
Kid Cruz, a few people have kind of talked about, and I just don't see it. I see him 20 lengths behind this field. I mean, he's been 15, 16 lengths behind fractions of 114 and 116. Do you realize how many lengths social inclusion is going to be in front of this horse? I just don't get it. I just don't know if people are reading the same form that I'm reading, because I can't see Kid Cruz winning this race if they run this race 100 times.
Yeah, I don't really see it either. I think he's kind of slow, and that last race that he ran here locally in the Tessio Stakes, that race was slow, and people are trying. The argument I keep hearing is, well, he's a closer, and that race was slow, so he ran a good race, but he didn't even really close there. I mean, he was 3 lengths off the pace, a half mile in. That's not closing in my book. He wasn't 10 back or anything. So, and I mean, that field just wasn't anything. I mean, Matsusak, I think he ran up in New York and got like destroyed by everybody. So I don't see that he's beaten anything, and I don't see that he's anywhere near fast enough. And I mean, I don't think he'll be 20 lengths back like you say. Well, I think he's going to be forced to run faster than he's ever ran in his life, and it's not going to matter that he's off the pace. It's just I just don't even see him being a factor at all. And it's a shame. He's a nice horse. He's a horse who he always gets up and runs his race. And I think he's going to be a pretty good horse at his class level. I'm just not sure that this is it.
Yeah, that's kind of where I'm at. Is what he's got the pedigree. I think there is some latent talent there.
Mm-hmm.
I just think to expect a horse with those fractions and those running lines to go straight into a Grade 1 at this time of the year. And if you noticed his workout pattern, he officially doesn't have a workout listed since April 2nd. I don't know what's up with that. Maybe he's just so good that he doesn't need to work out. I don't know. Another horse I want to talk about was Ria Antonio. I'm one of those type that I don't mind her running in this race.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to pick her, but I'm not one of those people that believes it ruins horses to run them.
Mm-hmm.
Obviously untappable at a higher speed figure. If you actually just take her speed figure at face value and her running style, she should probably run 3rd, 4th, 5th, or 6th in this race.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. I don't see what the big deal is. Everybody getting so mad that she's running here, and maybe that's, maybe more of a dynamic of American racing, that for us we make it such a big deal when the girls run against the boys, and in other countries that happens all the time. It's not a big deal at all. I say, why not put her in here? Maybe, maybe people think that you have to have a super filly to throw them in with the boys, but I would not be. I mean, I'm not going to play her, but I wouldn't be surprised if she snuck in maybe for 3rd, given this pace setup, because she obviously runs from off the pace. Like you said, Untappable was much the best in the Kentucky Oaks, and for what it's worth, I think that Fashion Plate kind of blowing the break, and that pace not shaping up to what we thought it could have been, really kind of hurt Ria Antonia a bit. It definitely wasn't as fast as maybe she would have liked for it to be, to really be a factor there. But I don't see that she's going to be ruined or her confidence is going to be forever shattered for running here. So I'm all for it. And this clearly was the plan for them. They wanted originally to run her in the Derby after she won at the Breeders' Cup. So they didn't put her there, put her here against a smaller field. And I've seen a lot crazier things happen than if she gets up for 3rd in this race.
And the Black-Eyed Susan came up with 11 horses. She could have drew the 12 hole in that race and ran 5th just as easily. So I think, it ain't going to ruin her. She's lightly raced still this year, and if she's got the talent, she can run in the top 5, and she can move forward later on this summer and have a good summer campaign.
Mm-hmm.
So getting back to the race, first off, are you predicting fast, moderate, or slow fractions? And where do you see social inclusion on the turn? I mean, how is he going to win this race if he is going to win it?
I think the fractions are going to be fast, but I don't necessarily see it being contested. I just think social inclusion is just fast. So it's going to be healthy fractions with him up front, but I don't see a bunch of horses hanging with him. I think, even Pablo Del Monte and stuff is going to be maybe slightly off him a little bit. I think he's going to be your leader heading into the turn, and it's going to be a matter of whether or not he can hang on or not. I know people are, have been mentioning, and I guess we should say that, he did have a bit of a foot bruise, and he did miss 1 week. I mean, 1 week of work. So normally that's just one work. For him, it seems like it's about 3. But regardless, he should be fit. He's been running more than anybody else lately, and working more than anybody else lately, so that's not really too big of a deal for me. He came back just the other day with the work, and it, at least time-wise, it looked to be fine. So I expect him to be your leader heading to the turn. It's a matter of whether or not he can keep it, but I think he can. We'll just, we'll kind of see.
Yeah, I think this is going to be the opposite of the Derby. I think we're going to have fast fractions, but like you say, social inclusion's a fast horse. And if for some reason Baron or Pablo Del Monte set those fractions, well, they're fast too. So none
Hmm.
of them would surprise me. I think it's going to be social inclusion. And
Hmm.
then, I think what we're going to get is what we didn't get in the Derby. We're going to have a couple of packs. And that's
Yeah.
what was so strange about this year's Derby. It was just 15 horses just fighting for position the whole race. And I think we'll
Yes.
see social inclusion on the lead, and then we'll see Pablo and Baron and California Chrome, and then we'll see Ride on Curlin and Rhea, and it'll be a nice three little
Hmm.
groups, and it'll probably be a fairly normal run race, and I think that's usually when you actually find out who is capable of going a mile and 3/16 and with some decent fractions. We'll actually find out
Hmm.
who has some talent, and if you were to tell me which horse is capable of running a 107 Beyer speed figure and winning the race, I think the only horse capable of doing that is social inclusion. If you were to tell me that, just California Chrome doesn't fire for whatever reason, then I would believe any one of Pablo and General A-Rod and Ride on Curlin and a couple others could win. And if you just told me it's going to be a normally run race and these horses are just outclassed, well, then I'd say California Chrome wins by 2 and social inclusion runs second.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think on paper California Chrome's the one to beat. I certainly couldn't play him on top. For me, since I couldn't, fully decide between my top two, what I'm going to say is, I'm going to suggest maybe an exacta. My top choice is social inclusion. I'll play him on top along with dynamic impact just to kind of, save myself a little if we do get the pace meltdown that, could possibly happen. So I'll play social inclusion and dynamic impact both on the top. And then underneath, I'll have both of them as well as Pablo Diamante and right on Curlin and California Chrome. So spread a little bit underneath for a second because, if we beat California Chrome on top, I think you can spread a little underneath because you're going to get a prize there.
Yeah, I think people don't realize the proportions of the win money, place money, uh, and getting back even to the Derby. I don't know if we even talked about this, but he paid 420 to show in the Derby and 720
Hmm.
to win. So usually, so like on these trifectas, he might over social inclusion might be $8 exacta, and under social inclusion might literally be like 22. Like
Yeah.
that, and that's not a bad bet. So,
Mhm.
and then third in a trifecta or second in a trifecta, if you get Pablo third, could actually be $100 trifecta. So there is ways to make money. I think this becomes more of a wagering strategy race, but I think for the people that truly just bet Triple Crown races and Breeders' Cup races, well then by all means, just pick him to win, pick 2 horses for second, and play it straight, and or key him in a double and try to take the money. If for me, I'm going to bet less money and just bet less combinations because to me, there's like 5 horses I'm just eliminating that I'm saying even at a mediocre effort, I think California Chrome can beat those 5. And
Mhm.
so I'll just take a shot with a couple of General A-Rod and Pablo and mix them around in exactas and tries and doubles and see what I can get kind of on that weird end. But again, the Derby I invested and wagered and tried to beat them. This race, it's more respect them and just see if you can kind of finagle out a wagering strategy to try to make a few dollars.
Mhm.
Should be an exciting weekend of racing. I know you wrote a nice blog on your trip to New York. You said one of those big old tracks, like you were surprised how big it was.
Yeah, I went to Belmont over the weekend. It was massive. It's like one big picnic, which was awesome, and got to see some really top class racing. Really enjoyed myself up there. So if you're ever up in the area, up in New York, I definitely recommend going to Belmont. I think it's probably one of my favorite tracks I've been to this point. Um, but aside from that, I also want to mention before we wrap it up here that all of you Verrazano fans, it looks like he may be making his first start over in Europe in the Longines Stakes. That's at Newbury on Saturday. We'll know the day before whether or not he runs, depending on the ground up there. Um, I couldn't have him. It's over a mile on a straight line mile at Newbury. I couldn't really have him there, but he is second in the betting overseas right now, so people do like him in there. So Verrazano fans, wake up early in the morning on Preakness Day and watch your boy.
No, that'll be interesting because I think a lot of people wanted to see him on the turf, and he's been over there in training now to the point where he's had plenty of time to adjust, and Aiden O'Brien knows how to train a horse or two, so could definitely see a really improved effort out of him. Well, we're looking forward to the Preakness. We've got the Pimlico Preakness Double, the Pimlico Dixie Preakness Pick 3. Hopefully it pays more than the $9 than it did on Oaks Day. And then next week we'll come back and we'll take a look back at the Black-Eyed Susans and a couple of these races, and then preview some upcoming stakes races. That's going to do it for another edition of Down to the Wire.